Loremaster Jido here. I'm the librarian of Azeroth, and I'm bringing you the lore straight from the books. For tonight's bedtime story, we're reading 8 books that cover the entire history of the Blood Elves. 6 of these books are from vanilla and are part of the well-read achievement. 2 others are about historical Blood Elf weapons held by fire mages and marksman hunters during Legion. These books are Exile of the High Elves, The Founding of Quel'Thalas, Arathor and the Troll Wars, The Guardians of Tirisfall, Sunwell, The Fall of Quel'Thalas, Rise of the Blood Elves, Felo'melorn, and Thas'dorah, Legacy of the Windrunners. Check the timestamps below in the description for your reference. Now, let's slow it down and take a deep breath and make yourself comfortable. Feel the weight of yourself sinking into the surface you're laying on. Take a deep breath in and hold. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in again. 2, 3, 4, and out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now breathe comfortably at your own pace. Gently let your eyes close, and let's dive into the Exile of the High Elves. As the centuries passed, the Night Elves' new society grew strong and expanded throughout the budding forest that they came to call Ashenvale. Many of the creatures and species that were abundant before the Great Sundering, such as furbolgs and quillboars, reappeared and flourished in the land. Under the Druids' benevolent leadership, the Night Elves enjoyed an era of unprecedented peace and tranquility under the stars. However, many of the original Highborn survivors grew restless. Like Illidan before them, they fell victim to the withdrawal that came from the loss of their coveted magics. They were tempted to tap the energies of the Well of Eternity and exult in their magical practices. Dath'Remar, the brash, outspoken leader of the Highborn, began to mock the Druids publicly, calling them cowards for refusing to wield the magic that he said was theirs by right. Malfurion and the Druids dismissed Dath'Remar's arguments and warned the Highborn that any use of magic would be punishable by death. In an insolent and ill-fated attempt to convince the Druids to rescind their law, Dath'Remar and his followers unleashed a terrible magical storm upon Ashenvale. The Druids could not bring themselves to put so many of their kin to death, so they decided to exile the reckless Highborn from their lands. Dath'Remar and his followers, glad to be rid of their conservative cousins at last, boarded a number of specially crafted ships and set sail upon the seas. Though none of them knew what awaited them beyond the waters of the raging maelstrom, they were eager to establish their own homeland where they could practice their coveted magics with impunity. The Highborn, or Quel'Thalas, as Ashara had named them in ages past, would eventually set shore upon the eastern land men would call Lordaeron. They planned to build their own magical kingdom, Quel'Thalas, and reject the Night Elves' precepts of moon worship and nocturnal activity. Forever after, they would embrace the sun and be known only as the High Elves. The Founding of Quel'Thalas. The High Elves, led by Dath'Remar, left Kalimdor behind them and challenged the storms of the Maelstrom. Their fleets wandered the wreckage of the world for many long years, and they discovered mysteries and lost kingdoms along their sojourn. Dath'Remar, who had taken the name Sunstrider, or He Who Walks the Day, sought out places of considerable lay power upon which to build a new homeland for his people. His fleet finally landed on the beaches of the kingdom men would later call Lordaeron. Forging inland, the High Elves founded a settlement within the tranquil Tirisfall glades. After a few years, many of them began to go mad. It was theorized that something evil slept beneath that particular part of the world, but the rumors were never proven to be true. The High Elves packed up their encampment and moved northward towards another land rich with ley energies. As the High Elves crossed the rugged, mountainous lands of Lordaeron, their journey became more perilous. Since they were effectively cut off from the life-giving energies of the Well of Eternity, many of them fell ill from the frigid climate or died from starvation. The most disconcerting change, however, was the fact that they were no longer immortal or immune to the elements. They also shrank somewhat in height, and their skin lost its characteristic violet hue. Despite their hardships, they encountered many wondrous creatures that had never been seen in Kalimdor. They also found tribes of primitive humans who hunted through the ancient forest lands. However, the direst threat they encountered were the voracious and cunning forest trolls of Zul'Aman. These moss-skinned trolls could regenerate lost limbs and heal grievous physical injuries, but they proved to be a barbaric, evil race. The Amani Empire stretched across most of northern Lordaeron, and the trolls fought hard to keep unwanted strangers from their borders. The elves developed a deep loathing for the vicious trolls and killed them on sight whenever they were encountered. After many long years, the High Elves finally found a land which was reminiscent of Kalimdor. Deep within the northern forests of the continent, they founded the kingdom of Quel'Thalas and vowed to create a mighty empire which would dwarf that of their Kaldorei cousins. Unfortunately, they soon learned that Quel'Thalas was founded upon an ancient troll city that the trolls still held to be sacred. Almost immediately, the trolls began to attack the elven settlements en masse. The stubborn elves, unwilling to give up their new land, utilized the magics which they had gleaned from the Well of Eternity and kept the savage trolls at bay. Under Dathramar's leadership, they were able to defeat the Amani warbands that outnumbered them 10-1. Some elves, wary of the Kaldorei's ancient warnings, felt that their use of magic might possibly draw the attention of the banished Burning Legion. Therefore, they decided to mask their lands within a protective barrier which would still allow them to work their enchantments. They constructed a series of monolithic runestones at various points around Quel'Thalas, which marked the boundaries of the magic barrier. The runestones not only masked the elves' magic from extra-dimensional threats, but helped to frighten away the superstitious troll warbands as well. As time wore on, Quel'Thalas became a shining monument to the High Elves' efforts and magical prowess. Its beauteous palaces were crafted in the same architectural style as the ancient halls of Kalimdor, yet they were interwoven with the natural topography of the land. Quel'Thalas had become the shining jewel that the elves had longed to create. The Convocation of Silvermoon was founded as the ruling power over Quel'Thalas, though the Sunstrider dynasty maintained a modicum of political power. Comprised of 7 of the greatest High Elf lords, the Convocation worked to secure the safety of the elven lands and people. Surrounded by their protective barrier, the High Elves remained unmoved by the old warnings of the Kaldorei and continued to use magic flagrantly in almost all aspects of their lives. For nearly 4,000 years, the High Elves lived peacefully within their secluded safety of their kingdom. Nevertheless, the vindictive trolls were not so easily defeated. They plotted and schemed in the depths of the forests and waited for the numbers of their warbands to grow. Finally, a mighty troll army charged out from the shadowy forests and once again laid siege to the shining spires of Quel'Thalas. Arathor and the Troll Wars. As the High Elves fought for their lives against the trolls' fierce onslaught, the scattered nomadic humans of Lordaeron fought to consolidate their own tribal lands. The tribes of early humanity raided each other's settlements with little heed for racial unification or honor. Yet one tribe, known as the Arathi, saw the trolls were becoming too great a threat to ignore. The Arathi wished to bring all of the tribes under its rule so they could provide a unified front against the troll warbands. Over the course of 6 years, the cunning Arathi outmaneuvered and outfought the rival tribes. After every victory, the Arathi offered peace and equality to the conquered people. Thus, they won the loyalty of those they had beaten. Eventually, the Arathi tribe came to include many disparate tribes, and the ranks of its army grew vast. Confident that they could hold their own against the troll warbands, or even the reclusive elves if need be, the Arathi warlords decided to construct a mighty fortress city in the southern regions of Lordaeron. The city-state, named Strom, became the capital of the Arathi nation, Arathor. As Arathor prospered, humans from all over the vast continent traveled south to the protection and safety of Strom. United under one banner, the human tribes developed a strong, optimistic culture. Thoradin, the king of Arathor, knew that the mysterious elves in the Northlands were under constant siege by the trolls, but refused to risk the safety of his people in defense of reclusive strangers. Many months passed as rumors of the elves' supposed defeat trickled down from the north. It was only when weary ambassadors from Quel'Thalas reached Strom that Thoradin realized how great the troll threat truly was. The elves informed Thoradin that the troll armies were vast, and that once the trolls had destroyed Quel'Thalas, they would move on to attack the Southlands. The desperate elves, in dire need of military aid, hastily agreed to teach certain select humans to wield magic in exchange for their help against the warbands. Thoradin, distrustful of any magic, agreed to aid the elves out of necessity. Almost immediately, elven sorcerers arrived in Arathor and began to instruct a group of humans in the ways of magic. The elves found that, although humans were innately clumsy in their handling of magic, they possessed a startling natural affinity for it. 100 men were taught the very basics of the elves' magic secrets, no more than was absolutely necessary to combat the trolls. Convinced that their human students were ready to aid in the struggle, the elves left Strom and traveled north alongside the mighty armies of King Thoradin. The united elf and human armies clashed against the overwhelming troll warbands at the foot of the Alterac Mountains. The battle lasted for many days, but the unflagging armies of Arathor never tired or gave an inch of ground before the troll onslaught. The elven lords deemed that the time had come to release the powers of their magic upon the enemy. The 100 human magi and a multitude of elven sorcerers called down the fury of the heavens and set the troll armies ablaze. The elemental fires prevented the trolls from regenerating their wounds and burned their tortured forms from the inside out. As the troll armies broke and attempted to flee, Thoradin's armies ran them down and slaughtered every last one of their soldiers. The trolls would never fully recover from their defeat, and history would never see the trolls rise as one nation again. Assured that Quel'Thalas was safe from destruction, the elves made a pledge of loyalty and friendship to the nation of Arathor and to the bloodline of its king, Thoradin. Humans and elves would nurture peaceful relations for ages to come. The Guardians of Tirisfall. With the absence of trolls in the Northlands, the elves of Quel'Thalas bent their efforts towards rebuilding their glorious homeland. The victorious armies of Arathor returned home to the Southlands of Strom. The human society of Arathor grew and prospered, yet Thoradin, fearful that his kingdom would splinter apart if it overextended itself, maintained that Strom was the center of the Arathorian Empire. After many peaceful years of growth and commerce, mighty Thoradin departed on one final quest, never to return, leaving Arathor's younger generation free to expand the empire beyond the lands of Strom. The original 100 magi, who were tutored in the ways of magic by the elves, expanded their powers and studied the mystic disciplines of spell-weaving in much greater detail. These magi, initially chosen for their strong wills and noble spirits, had always practiced their magic with care and responsibility. However, they passed their secrets and powers onto a newer generation that had no concept of the rigors of war or the necessity for self-restraint. These younger magicians began to practice magic for personal gain rather than out of any responsibility toward their fellows. As the empire grew and expanded into new lands, The young magicians also spread out into the Southlands. Wielding their mystical powers, the magicians protected their brethren from the wild creatures of the land and made it possible for new city-states to be constructed in the wilderness. Yet, as their powers grew, the magicians became ever more conceited and isolated from the rest of society. The second Arathorian city-state of Dalaran was founded in the lands north of Strom. Many fledgling wizards left the restraining confines of Strom behind and traveled to Dalaran, where they hoped to use their new powers with greater freedom. These magicians used their skills to build up the enchanted spires of Dalaran and reveled in the pursuit of their studies. The citizens of Dalaran tolerated the magicians' endeavors and built up a bustling economy under the protection of their magic-using defenders. Yet, as more and more magicians practiced their arts, the fabric of reality around Dalaran began to weaken and tear. The sinister agents of the Burning Legion, who had been banished when the Well of Eternity collapsed, were lured back into the world by the heedless spellcasting of the magicians of Dalaran. Though these relatively weak demons did not appear in force, they did sow considerable confusion and chaos within the streets of Dalaran. Most of these demonic encounters were isolated events, and the ruling magicrats did what they could to keep such events hidden from the public. The most powerful magicians were sent to capture the elusive demons, but they often found themselves hopelessly outmatched by the lone agents of the mighty Legion. After a few months, the superstitious peasantry began to suspect that their sorceress rulers were hiding something terrible from them. Rumors of revolution began to sweep through the streets of Dalaran as the paranoid citizenry questioned the motives and practices of the magicians they had once admired. The magicrats, fearing that the peasants would revolt and that Strom would take action against them, turned to the only group they felt would understand their particular problem: the Elves. Upon hearing the magicrats' news of demonic activity in Dalaran, the Elves quickly dispatched their mightiest wizards to the human lands. The Elven wizards studied the energy currents in Dalaran and made detailed reports of all demonic activity that they beheld. They concluded that although there were only a few demons loose in the world, the Legion itself would remain a dire threat so long as humans continued to wield the forces of magic. The Council of Silvermoon, which ruled over the Elves of Quel'Thalas, entered into a secret pact with the magicrat lords of Dalaran. The Elves told the magicrats about the history of ancient Kalimdor and of the Burning Legion, a history which still threatened the world. They informed the humans that, so long as they used magic, they would need to protect their citizenry from the malicious agents of the Legion. The magicrats proposed the notion of empowering a single mortal champion who would utilize their powers in order to fight a never-ending secret war against the Legion. It was stressed that the majority of mankind could never know about the Guardians or the threat of the Legion, for they fear that they would riot in fear and paranoia. The Elves agreed to the proposal and founded a secret society that would watch over the selection of the Guardian and help to stem the rise of chaos in the world. The society held its secret meetings in the shadowed Tirisfall glades, where the High Elves had first settled in Lordaeron. Thus, they named the secret sect the Guardians of Tirisfall. The mortal champions who were chosen to be guardians were imbued with incredible powers of both elven and human magic. Though there would only ever be one guardian at a time, they held such vast power that they could single-handedly fight back the Legion's agents wherever they were found in the world. The guardian power was so great that only the Council of Tirisfall was allowed to choose potential successors to the mantle of guardianship. Whenever a guardian grew too old or wearied of the secret war against chaos, the council chose a new champion and, under controlled conditions, formally channel the guardian power into its new agent. As the generations passed, guardians defended the masses of humanity from the invisible threat of the Burning Legion throughout the lands of Arathor and Quel'Thalas. Arathor grew and prospered while the use of magic spread throughout the Empire. Meanwhile, the Guardians kept careful watch for signs of demonic activity. Sunwell, the fall of Quel'Thalas. Though he had defeated all people that he saw as his enemies, Arthas was still haunted by the ghost of Kel'Thuzad. The ghost told Arthas that he needed to be revived for the next phase of the Lich King's plan. To revive him, Arthas needed to bring Kel'Thuzad's remains to the mystical Sunwell, hidden within the High Elves' eternal kingdom of Quel'Thalas. Arthas and his scourge invaded Quel'Thalas and laid siege to the Elves' crumbling defenses. Sylvanas Windrunner, the Ranger General of Silvermoon, put up a valiant fight, but Arthas eventually eradicated the High Elf army and battled through to the Sunwell. In a cruel gesture of his dominance, he even raised Sylvanas's defeated body as a banshee, cursed to endless undeath in the service of Quel'Thalas's conqueror. Ultimately, Arthas submerged Kel'Thuzad's remains within the holy waters of the Sunwell. Although the potent waters of eternity were fouled by this act, Kel'Thuzad was reborn as a sorceress lich. Resurrected as a far more powerful being, Kel'Thuzad explained the next phase of the Lich King's plan. By the time Arthas and his army of the undead turned southward, not one living elf remained in Quel'Thalas. The glorious homeland of the High Elves, which had stood for more than 9,000 years, was no more. Rise of the Blood Elves. At this time, the undead scourge had essentially transformed Lordaeron and Quel'Thalas into the toxic Plaguelands. There were only a few pockets of Alliance resistance forces left. One such group, consisting primarily of High Elves, was led by the last of the Sunstrider dynasty, Prince Kael'thas. Kael, an accomplished wizard himself, grew wary of the failing alliance. The High Elves grieved for the loss of their homeland and decided to call themselves Blood Elves in honor of their fallen people. Yet as they worked to keep the scourge at bay, they suffered greatly at being cut off from the Sunwell that had empowered them. Desperate to find a cure for his people's racial addiction to magic, Kael did the unthinkable. He embraced his people's highborn ancestry and joined with Illidan and his Naga in hopes of finding a new magical power source upon which to feed. The remaining Alliance commanders condemned the Blood Elves as traitors and cast them out for good. With no place left to go, Kael and his Blood Elves followed Lady Vash to Outland to help contest the warden, Maiev, who had captured Illidan. With the combined Naga and Blood Elf forces, they managed to defeat Maiev and free Illidan from her grasp. Based in Outland, Illidan gathered his forces for a second strike against the Lich King and his fortress of Icecrown. Felo'melorn. Felo'melorn, Flame Strike, Sword of Kings, Bane of Trolls. Its legend stretches back through the millennia. It stands as a symbol of hope, loss, and power of destruction and renewal. Those who have wielded Felo'melorn have forever etched their names into history. Will you do the same? Though it's not known for certain, rumors that have passed down through generations suggest that a young Dath'Remar Sunstrider, who would one day become king of the High Elves, dreamed of the weapon Felo'melorn. In that dream, the arcane blade burned like the sun and dispatched so many enemies that it created a swift-flowing river of blood. Dath'Remar would later recount the specifics of the blade's appearance to the renowned magesmith Luminarian as he crafted the weapon on his arcane forge. From the personal writings of Serena Everwind, Night Elf priestess during the War of the Ancients. Dath'Remar wielded Felo'melorn, Flamestrike, like an elf possessed. He was an unstoppable force, at once majestic and graceful, yet savage and deadly. The runes of the blade seemed to pulse in rhythm with the pounding of Dath'Remar's fierce heart as he separated limb from body and head from shoulders. When the fighting was done, Dath'Remar stood painted in demon blood. As night fell, we knew that more battles remained, and yet, with this elf and this blade among us, we held out hope that victory did not lie beyond our grasp. In the hands of Anastarian Sunstrider, great-grandson of the High King Elf, Dathramar, Felo'melorn became a legendary troll killer. Among the trolls, whispers spread of a spellbound blade, empowered by arcane magic, not only to slay the most formidable and cunning of its enemies, but also to cut through superior numbers and irrigate battlefields with their blood. Troll witch doctors set about casting hexes and curses against the infamous weapon, but history bears out that even the darkest voodoo did little to negate the effectiveness of Felo'melorn during the Troll Wars. An account of the battle between the Death Knight Arthas and Anastarian Sunstrider during the attack on Quel'Thalas, from the personal writings of the former priestess Liadrin. All fighting came to a halt. Silence fell over the battlefield. I watched from a distance, helpless, as the former Prince Arthas cast a spell, freezing Anastarian in a coat of ice. The king cast a counterspell, freeing himself as the Death Knight advanced. Felo'melorn and Frostmourne met, the strident clash of their impact rolling out over the ice and across the blood-drenched tiles. The force of their meeting cleaved Felo'melorn, Flamestrike, in half. Arthas's swing continued, severing the right leg of our aged beloved king. Even as Anastarian dropped to his remaining knee, he struck out, burying his broken blade in the Death Knight's thigh. Arthas whirled Frostmourne up, over, and down, thrusting it to the hilt behind Anastarian's collarbone and deep into his chest. The Death Knight yanked his blade free. Anastarian pitched forward onto the ice. The great king of the High Elves was dead, and for many of us that day, our hopes and our hearts died with him. Excerpt from the journal of Loremaster Jido concerning Prince Quel'Thalas' return in the immediate wake of Quel'Thalas' destruction. Our fallen king, Anastarian, lay upon a table in the tavern hall. His broken blade, Felo'melorn, rested upon his chest, the two pieces joined. I told our prince that the weapon had been shattered in the battle with the Death Knight, Arthas. Quel'Thalas walked to his father's body and ran his finger over the fracture, remarking that he did not believe it possible for Flamestrike's blade to be sundered. I was left wondering what legacy, if any, awaited our people and the legendary blade that now symbolized not strength or dominance, but fallibility. In the time following the devastating scourge attack on Quel'Thalas, Prince Quel'Thalas renamed the High Elf survivors the Thas'dorah, or Blood Elves. While the prince and a band of Blood Elves assisted the human troops of Grand Marshal Garithos against the remaining undead forces, it was rumored that Quel'Thalas kept the pieces of his father's sword, Felo'melorn, on a sideboard in his dilapidated quarters. Quel'Thalas dreamed of making Flamestrike's blade whole again so that it might serve once more as a symbol of hope, to show his people that even in the face of overwhelming hardship, the Blood Elves would not be broken. In time, Prince Quel'Thalas Sunstrider realized his dream of rejoining the broken pieces of Felo'melorn. It is said that the sword was reforged with magic and hatred and a burning need for revenge. There are some who speculate that the sword was taken to a descendant of Luminarian, the magesmith who originally created the weapon on his legendary arcane forge before the War of the Ancients. This assertion has never been independently verified. An account of Quel'Thalas Sunstrider's battle with the Death Knight Arthas from the personal writings of Quel'Thalas. The Death Knight charged, his blade, Frostmourne, arcing down. I blocked with my staff, but it was no use. The stave shattered. It was then that I revealed my surprise. Felo'melorn, Flamestrike, mended, made whole once again. It burned with righteous fury as our two swords clashed. Each of us held steady blades pressed tight. I smiled and I asked Arthas if he remembered Felo'melorn. He snidely replied that he saw it snap beneath Frostmourne in the instant before he slew my father. When he shoved me back, I told him that I'd found the blade and had it reforged. broken swords are weak when they're mended, elf, the despicable former prince said. Human swords, perhaps, I replied, and I knew, that day I knew this one thing at least. I might not win, but Felo'melorn would not be broken again. Filled with renewed purpose, I attacked. From the Journal of Liandra Sunstrider, distant relative of King Astarion. Today, at last, my efforts to uncover the location of my birthright have borne fruit. It is now made known to me that the sword of my ancestors, Felo'melorn, Flamestrike, resides within the Lich King's stronghold of Icecrown Citadel. It was there that the blade was taken to after leaving the possession of the traitor Quel'Thalas Sunstrider. At last I shall validate my claim to the Sunstrider throne. I shall seek out Flamestrike, and I shall realize my destiny. Last journal entry of Liandra Sunstrider, distant relative of King Astarion. Icecrown Citadel, I curse your name. Along empty halls I made my way, through a twisting labyrinth of black serenite, until I beheld a warm red glow pouring from a rue at the end of a dismal passage. I entered and saw Felo'melorn, Flamestrike, mounted upon a dais. At last the sword would solidify my claim to the Sunstrider throne. I approached, awestruck, reached out, and the door slammed shut behind me. The prize I had so long sought was at last within my grasp, but now I'm trapped. Surely death awaits me, or perhaps something worse. Excerpt from a speech given by Aethys Sunreaver. My brothers, in the time since the Sunreaver's expulsion from the Kirin Tor, we have endeavored to secure readmission. I tell you now that the key to our salvation exists. It exists within the frozen black halls of Icecrown Citadel, in the possession of a fallen elf, Liandra Sunstrider. She dwells there now as a reanimated shell of her former self, but I have learned that it is Liandra who holds the infamous Blade of Kings, Felo'melorn, Flamestrike. It has been trusted to remain in her keeping by the Lich King himself, to aid in battle against the Legion. Liandra was obsessed with the blade while she was among the living, and when she ventured to Icecrown to claim it, that obsession proved to be her downfall. However, Liandra's tragic misstep provides us with an opportunity. An opportunity for the Sunreavers to retake our rightful place amongst the Kirin Tor. Thas'dorah, Legacy of the Windrunners. If only we could see the true glory of Quel'Thalas again. Thas'dorah was created to aid in the defense of the Highborn Kingdom, but over the course of its storied history, the weapon became so much more. It has journeyed from Azeroth to the darkest corners of the twisting Nether, and it has spilled the Burning Legion's blood on the demon's home territory. As of this book's writing, the rightful owner of this bow was still missing, but Illyria Windrunner was stalwart and practical. She would insist that a worthy champion use it to strike fear in the Legion's heart once again. Nearly 7,000 years ago, the Highborn founded a new home in the Eastern Kingdoms. Their journey had been hard, and the land was hostile, but the end result was astonishing. The Elves built upon a confluence of magical ley lines and created a city, Silvermoon, near the Sunwell, a fount of pure arcane power. The kingdom of Quel'Thalas rose over the land as a shining monument of the glorious civilization that had once surrounded the shores of the Well of Eternity. As the Sunwell's magic radiated outward through Eversong Woods, the forest's oldest tree began to absorb its energy. The massive tree was named Thas'dorah, the light of the forest. From its enchanted branches, the entire region seemed to be bathed in the glow of an eternal spring. This bow would be made from Thas'dorah's wood, and it would bear the legacy of a highborn family whose members showed heroism for thousands of years. The highborn elves of Quel'Thalas had fended off constant attacks from Amani trolls. To keep their enemies at bay, they constructed a series of monolithic runestones that acted as wards against intruders, and also hid the elves' use of arcane magic from the Burning Legion. The wards succeeded in keeping their enemies out of Silvermoon, in part due to their anchor. The elven arcanists had linked the runestones to Thas'dorah, tying the power of natural magic to their arcane spells. However, the tree's power could not keep the Highborn safe when they left their city. For that, they needed skilled fighters. The Amani trolls were wary of launching direct attacks on Silvermoon. The elves' magic kept them at bay for several millennia, but eventually the trolls lashed out again. The conflict would become known as the Troll Wars, and the death toll rose quickly. An order of fighters called Rangers was founded to defend Quel'Thalas. The greatest of these early Rangers was Talonus Windrunner, a master of archery and ranged combat. He swiftly rose in the ranks and was named the first Ranger General of Silvermoon for his bravery and valor. The leaders of Silvermoon commemorated the occasion by declaring that their champion be given a weapon befitting his new status. Highborn weaponsmiths set to work immediately. A trio of skilled artisans joined together to create a great bow for Talonus. They carved its body from a limb taken from Thas'dorah and infused the wood with waters of the Sunwell. Immersed in arcane power, the bow began to change. It was hardened, becoming nearly indestructible, and yet it still maintained its connection to the natural magics of Thas'dorah. When it was retrieved from the Sunwell, the bow radiated power. Talonus was humbled by the gift. He named the weapon Thas'dorah, Valor of the Forest. He promised that as long as this weapon protected Highborn lands, Silvermoon would never fall. Talonus made good on his promise. Thas'dorah's power was so skillfully wrought that even a novice would have been able to hit a target from 100 paces. In his hands, each arrow sang as it sailed to its mark. The Amani trolls soon learned to fear the sight of his bow, for if they ever caught a glimpse of it, they were within its range. They were forced to retreat, allowing the Highborn elves to settle deeper into the forest. Talonus Windrunner became a legend for his part in securing the land of Quel'Thalas for future generations. Thas'dorah remained with the Windrunner bloodline for thousands of years. The family dedicated their lives to the defense of Quel'Thalas, and in each generation, one would carry the bow into the forests to drive away any interlopers. Because Thas'dorah never left the region, it continued to bask in the radiant magic of the Sunwell and the surrounding forests. Slowly but surely, the bow was seasoned in a way no one could have anticipated. Its strength only increased. Its powers began to manifest in surprising ways. An arrow launched toward a target might be joined by other magical arrows, also aimed at the enemy. Ever after the Troll Wars drew to a close, Thas'dorah helped repel countless enemy incursions. A few years before the Horde invaded Azeroth, the Ranger General of Silvermoon was Loremaster Windrunner, who had 3 daughters, Illyria, Sylvanas, and Varisa. As the eldest, Illyria was to take on the mantle of Ranger General, but she had little use for traditions or expectations. She decided to apply her training to practical matters, so she became a Farstrider, a member of a group of rangers focused on fighting for the Highborn all across Azeroth. She made a name for herself after a number of quick, decisive victories. Her sister Sylvanas would one day rise to leadership in her stead. Thas'dorah remained in Larissa's hands. It would not be passed on to Illyria until tragedy struck. When the Horde invaded, most of the kingdoms of Azeroth did not believe it was a threat. After the orcs burned Stormwind to the ground, a few leaders took notice. The rulers of Silvermoon were reluctant to commit significant aid to the humans of Lordaeron, but Illyria thought that the demon-possessed orcs were a grave danger to the entire world. She led her group of rangers to Lordaeron against orders and fought at the Alliance's side with bravery. It wasn't until the orcs allied with the Amani trolls and turned their attention to Quel'Thalas that the Highborn understood the true threat. Many elven rangers, including Loremaster Windrunner, the Ranger General, died in a bloody attack. Sylvanas Windrunner would become the new Ranger General, but she passed Thas'dorah to her older sister Illyria. Sylvanas needed help to secure Quel'Thalas. She trusted that Illyria, a Farstrider, would have better opportunities to exact vengeance on the front lines. Her instincts proved correct. Illyria struck fear into orcs and trolls alike, bringing down countless enemies with her arrows. When the Second War ended, the orcs retreated to their homeworld of Draenor and rallied under a new war chief. Ner'zhul, the former chieftain of the Shadowmoon clan, promised that he would open portals to undiscovered worlds, ones ripe for plundering. The Alliance had no intention of letting him. Illyria volunteered to join the Alliance expedition as its lead scout. She carried Thas'dorah to Draenor with her. The need for revenge still weighed heavy on her heart. It wasn't until she became close to a human, Turalyon, that she began to see a future beyond this war. The Alliance expedition fought the Horde all across Draenor, but Ner'zhul succeeded in opening countless portals. The magical stress on the orcs' homeworld was so great that it was torn apart. Those among the Alliance who had not escaped through the Dark Portal, including Illyria and Turalyon, were presumed dead. When Thas'dorah was recovered from the Legion world of Niskara, it renewed hope that Illyria had survived the destruction of Draenor. Varisa believed that her eldest sister had continued her war against the evil by hunting the Burning Legion itself, pursuing it into the deepest recesses of the twisting Nether. Just as Thas'dorah had absorbed power from its native realm, it had drunk deeply of the chaotic magics swirling through the Nether. Its arrows grew more potent, more accurate, and more lethal against the minions of the dark. The bow became a symbol of war against the Legion, a means to rally the greatest hunters of Azeroth against the demon horde. Quel'Thalas is not what it once was. Thas'dorah, the tree from which the bow was crafted, was cut down by the forces of Arthas Menethil. The citadel of Deathholm now stands atop its withered roots. The Highborn suffered massive losses at the hands of the Scourge, so much so that the few remaining survivors call themselves Blood Elves in remembrance of that tragedy. This bow was crafted to protect innocents from evil. It has done so admirably on this world and on countless others. Now it has been returned to Azeroth. Launched by one of the world's greatest champions, Thas'dorah's arrows will fly once more against evil. And that was the full collection of the Blood Elves for your bedtime listening pleasure. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to get your library card and check out more books with me, the Librarian of Azeroth. Thanks for listening, and sweet dreams.